It was supposed to be just another routine training mission, an adventurous flight over the beautiful waters east of Florida. For 14 daring young Navy airmen aboard 5 TBM Avenger torpedo bombers, December 5, 1945, was meant to sharpen their navigation skills in the post-W2 calm. Little did they know it would be the final flight they'd ever take, and one that would etch their names into one of history's most enduring mysteries. The war had ended just months earlier. Spirits were high, peace had returned, and the military was transitioning back to peacetime duties. That day, the Flight 19 crew was assigned Navigation Problem Number 1 Inch, a relatively simple exercise. Fly east over the Atlantic to a known target site near the Bahamas, drop dummy bombs on a wrecked ship, turn north over Grand Bahama, then head home to Fort Lauderdale. Easy, right? But they were flying into the Bermuda Triangle, an infamous stretch of ocean bordered by Florida, Bermuda, and Puerto Rico. This region has a notorious reputation as Earth's largest maritime graveyard. Ships and aircraft vanish here like magic tricks gone wrong, often without a trace. Pilots and captains alike have reported strange compass failures, bizarre weather shifts, and eerie optical illusions. Some even whisper about aliens, time warps, or underwater cities, because when science can't explain something, our imagination fills the void. Flight 19 took off at 2:10 p.m. The weather, favorable. The mission on track. But by 3:45 p.m., something had gone terribly wrong. "Cannot see land," came the worried voice of Lieutenant Charles Taylor, the squadron leader and a seasoned combat pilot with 2,500 flying hours. "We seem to be off course." Then silence, then chaos. "We can't find west. Everything is wrong. We can't be sure of any direction. Everything looks strange, even the ocean." Another voice crackled over the radio. The tone turned panicked, disoriented, helpless. Then, chillingly, "It looks like we are entering white water. We're completely lost." And then, nothing. Flight 19 had vanished. Immediately, the Navy scrambled 2 massive PBM-5 Mariner seaplanes to search the last known location. One of those rescue planes carrying 13 crewmen also disappeared. A nearby ship reported seeing a fiery explosion in the sky around the same time. 6 aircraft, 27 men, all gone. No distress beacons and no wreckage, no oil slicks, just silence over the sea. Theories flooded in. Some blamed human error. Taylor, possibly mistaking the Bahamas for the Keys due to a faulty compass. Others blamed violent weather or engine failure. But none of that explains the total disappearance. Even modern searches over 250,000 square miles have yielded nothing. Not even a wingtip. This single event ignited the myth of the Bermuda Triangle, spawning books, documentaries, and conspiracy theories that stretch to this day. Flight 19's disappearance wasn't just a tragedy. It was the spark that gave the triangle its teeth. Every December 5th, a modest museum in Fort Lauderdale, once the very airbase the flight departed from, hosts a ceremony to honor the lost patrol. Veterans, families, and historians gather, clinging to memory in the face of mystery. Whatever the truth, one thing is certain. These men were brave. They trained for war, flew with honor, and vanished in pursuit of duty. Though they never returned, their story endures. Proof that even in peace, danger can hide in plain sight. They died doing what they loved, and for that, they'll never be forgotten. In the world of great exploration mysteries, few are as captivating or enduring as the disappearance of Colonel Percy Fawcett in the Amazon jungle in 1925. A decorated British explorer, Fawcett wasn't just any adventurer, he was one of the last of his kind, driven by an intense belief that somewhere deep in the uncharted heart of Brazil lay the ruins of a lost ancient civilization he called the City of Z. This wasn't some wild guess. Fawcett had combed through maps, historical accounts, indigenous stories, and archaeological hints suggesting that advanced societies may have once thrived in places modern science believed were uninhabitable. Determined to prove the skeptics wrong, he set off into the Amazon one final time, accompanied only by his 21-year-old son Jack and Jack's friend, Raleigh Ramel. It was a stripped-down expedition by design. Fawcett believed that smaller groups would draw less attention from potentially hostile tribes and move more efficiently through the dense jungle. Before departing, he sent letters back to Britain stating firmly that no one should come looking for them if they failed to return. It would be the last time anyone heard from them. What followed was one of the most haunting disappearances in exploration history. Fawcett's last known message came from a place he dubbed Dead Horse Camp, where he optimistically reported that all was well and they were heading deeper into the forest. And then nothing. For decades, their fate remained a complete mystery. Did they succumb to disease, starvation, or the countless dangers lurking in the Amazon? Were they killed by a hostile tribe? Or, most tantalizing of all, did they actually find the city and choose to stay hidden from the outside world? The mystery drew in searchers and dreamers alike. Over 100 people reportedly died trying to retrace Fawcett's path, many of them driven by the same obsession with the unknown that led Fawcett into the jungle in the first place. Theories began to multiply like vines in the rainforest. Some claimed the group was killed by tribes who misunderstood their intentions. Others believed they were adopted into an indigenous community and chose never to return. More far-fetched versions included alien abduction, portals to another dimension, or even that Fawcett had gone mad and established a new society in the jungle. What makes the story even more fascinating is that modern science has started to catch up with Fawcett's hunches. While his mythical Z might not exist in the form he imagined, recent discoveries using satellite imagery and LiDAR technology have revealed massive earthworks and road systems buried beneath the rainforest canopy, evidence of large, complex settlements that predate European colonization. In a way, Fawcett wasn't wrong. His conviction that ancient civilizations could flourish in the Amazon, long dismissed by Western academia as fantasy, is now being taken very seriously by archaeologists. His tragic journey wasn't in vain. It helped keep alive the idea that there is always more to discover, even in a world we think we've mapped. Today, Percy Fawcett's story lives on not just in history books, but in films like The Lost City of Z, which dramatizes his final expedition, and in countless documentaries and articles that continue to probe the mystery. Was he a visionary or a man consumed by myth? Perhaps both. What's clear is that his legacy has inspired generations of explorers, scientists, and storytellers to keep asking questions, to keep searching the unknown, and to respect the secrets that still lie buried in the world's last true frontiers. The jungle may have claimed his body, but not his legend. It was a crisp Saturday in 2015 when 24-year-old Kristi Kafka-Laudes laced up her boots for a hike she'd dreamed about since arriving in Norway. A student from Melbourne on exchange at the University of Bergen, Kristi was studying music and cultural studies. She was full of life, drawn to the outdoors, and always up for a challenge. Trolltunga, Norway's dramatic cliff jutting 700 meters above Lake Ringedalsvatnet, was the perfect adventure. The trail to Trolltunga is no easy stroll. It's a long, steep hike over rocky terrain, and conditions can be unpredictable. But for thrill seekers and nature lovers, the view from the tongue-shaped rock formation makes every step worth it. That day, Kristi and two friends joined a larger group of around 30 hikers making the trek together. After hours of climbing, they finally reached the summit. The scenery was stunning: sheer cliffs, glacial lakes, and that famous ledge drawing tourists from all over the world. People posed for photos, edged toward the cliff for the perfect shot, and soaked in the beauty around them. Kristi and her friends waited their turn, chatting and taking in the view. When another group began taking photos near the edge, Kristi stepped aside, moving along a narrow side path to avoid getting in their way. It wasn't for a photo. It wasn't a dare. It was a simple, courteous move, but the ground beneath her feet was unstable, littered with loose rocks. And then it gave way. There was no cry for help, no scream, just silence. Her friends, only steps ahead, turned around to find she was gone. Panic set in. Witnesses who saw the fall rushed to help, but there was little anyone could do. The terrain was remote, with poor cell service, and it took hours for emergency crews to arrive. A helicopter touched down just before midnight, but recovery would have to wait until the following day. Back in Australia, Kristi's family received the devastating news. Rumors quickly circulated that she'd fallen while taking a selfie, but her mother, Millie, was quick to correct the story. Kristi hadn't been showing off or standing at the edge. She had simply been stepping aside when tragedy struck. Bringing Kristi home was another challenge. Norwegian authorities needed time to complete investigations, and it took 10 agonizing days before her body could be returned to her family. Kristi's accident was the first fatality recorded at Trolltunga. It sparked conversations about safety on the trail. There were no barriers, and many hikers arrived unprepared for the physical demands of the climb. Tour guides reported injuries and rescues every season, and the trail's growing popularity on social media had only increased the risks. Christy was adventurous, kind, and full of promise. She wasn't just a tourist. She was a daughter, a sister, a friend. Her passing was a cruel reminder that nature, while breathtaking, doesn't forgive small missteps. To those who knew her, Trolltunga will never be just a hiking trail again. It's where a bright light was lost too soon. It was supposed to be the ultimate test of endurance, an adventurous solo trek to the top of the world. For David Sharp, a 34-year-old British engineer turned daredevil mountaineer, Mount Everest wasn't just a goal, it was the holy grail of human willpower. He'd climbed Kilimanjaro, conquered the Matterhorn, and stood atop Cho Oyu, all without the help of supplemental oxygen. But in May of 2006, Sharp embarked on what would tragically become his last expedition. Mount Everest, standing at a mind-melting 29,032 feet, is known for more than its beauty. It's also a deadly place. Above 8,000 meters lies the death zone, where oxygen is so scarce the human body literally begins to shut down. Frostbite, hallucinations, and suffocation aren't rare. They're expected. To survive up there, you need oxygen tanks, guides, teamwork, and maybe a bit of luck. Sharp had none of the above. A purist at heart, Sharp believed using oxygen was cheating. He wanted to feel the raw force of nature, to battle Everest with nothing but his lungs, his boots, and sheer grit. He even took the budget route, a $6,200 basic service package from a Nepalese agency called Asian Trekking. For reference, that's like showing up to fight a dragon in flip-flops when everyone else brought armor. On May 13, 2006, David made his final summit attempt. No guides, no radio, no backup plan, just a quiet British man pushing toward the top of the world. What happened next is shrouded in mystery. Some climbers claimed they saw him near the summit, but by May 14th he was found slumped inside Green Boots Cave, a notorious overhang named after another fallen climber whose neon boots became a landmark. Sharp was alive, barely. He'd crawled into the cave suffering from extreme frostbite, oxygen depletion, and likely hypothermia. A team of Turkish climbers passed him. Others from a commercial expedition led by Russell Bryce also saw him, but no rescue was mounted. The brutal reality? In the death zone, helping someone could mean dying yourself. One Sherpa tried. Sharp whispered, "My name is David Sharp. I'm with Asian Trekking and I just want to sleep." And with that, he did. Forever. Around 40 climbers walked past him that day. Some offered oxygen or checked his pulse, but most kept moving. The summit was calling. News of his death caused an uproar. Viral videos and interviews questioned the humanity of Everest climbers. Was it ambition? Self-preservation? Or had Everest become a trophy graveyard? Sharp's death sparked global debate about the ethics of mountaineering and whether some goals just aren't worth dying for. A year later, Sherpas respectfully moved his body off the trail. He now rests among more than 200 other souls frozen into Everest's slopes. What makes this story so heartbreaking isn't just that David died, it's that he died surrounded by people, yet utterly alone. He wasn't reckless. He wasn't unprepared. He was simply too stubborn, too devoted to purity, too human. David Sharp died doing what he loved, chasing something bigger than himself. And maybe in that silent, snow-covered cave, he reached his summit in a different way. In 2006, David Sharp, a 34-year-old British climber with a love for mountaineering and a passion for pushing limits, set his sights on summiting Mount Everest, the highest peak in the world. He was not part of a large expedition, nor did he have a team of Sherpas helping him along the way. He chose to climb solo, carrying limited oxygen and minimal gear, hoping to rely on grit and determination rather than luxury and support. David had previously attempted Everest in 2003 but turned back. This time he was determined to reach the top, climbing from the Tibetan side along the notoriously challenging North Face route. Unlike the crowded and commercialized southern route, the northern side is colder, windier, and has fewer climbers around. Sharp did make it to the summit, which is a remarkable achievement, but the mountain does not let anyone off easy. On his descent, he encountered serious problems. Somewhere around 8,500 meters in an area called Green Boots Cave, he stopped to rest. This cave, marked by the body of a long-dead climber wearing neon green boots, is infamous as a landmark on the trail. Unfortunately, David was already severely weakened by the extreme altitude, lack of oxygen, and exposure. He sat down, too exhausted to move, and remained there. Now here is where things get ethically murky. That day, over 40 other climbers passed by David Sharp as he sat there alive but dying. Some thought he was already dead. Others realized he was alive but assumed he was beyond saving or felt they could not help without risking their own lives. One climber, Mark Inglis, a double amputee from New Zealand, later stated that David was non-responsive and that it was too dangerous to attempt a rescue at that altitude. This sparked a firestorm of controversy. The world was shocked that someone could be left to die while so many walked by. Media outlets picked up the story, and it became a global debate about the ethics of extreme mountaineering. Do you push on toward the summit at all costs, or do you turn back and try to save a fellow human being, even if it jeopardizes your own survival? Sir Edmund Hillary, the first man to summit Everest, was openly critical. He said no summit is worth a life, and that something had gone seriously wrong in the climbing culture if people could step over a dying man in pursuit of a goal. Other climbers defended the decisions made that day, arguing that above 8,000 meters, known as the death zone, every step is a struggle, and rescuing someone could be physically impossible. David Sharp's story became more than just another tragedy on Everest. It became a symbol of the fine line between ambition and ethics in the mountains. His death served as a wake-up call to the climbing community. Since then, some changes have been made. Expeditions now often carry more supplemental oxygen, teams are more prepared for emergencies, and climbers are encouraged to make decisions not just based on success, but on safety and morality. Still, Sharp's fate hangs heavy over Everest, like the thin air near its peak. It is a chilling reminder that the mountain is not just a place of dreams and glory, but also of harsh truths and unforgiving consequences. Everest is majestic, but it does not care how strong your will is or how pure your passion. It demands respect, and sometimes even that is not enough. David Sharp's story will always serve as a sobering example of what can happen when human ambition meets the brutal indifference of nature. On July 18, 2023, 71-year-old Steve Curry laced up his hiking boots and headed out for what was supposed to be just another adventure. A seasoned outdoorsman from Sunland, California, Steve had spent his life chasing the thrill of the wild, rock climbing, mountain biking, hiking through the harshest terrain he could find. To him, nature wasn't something to fear. It was home. That morning, he set off into Death Valley National Park, one of the most unforgiving landscapes on Earth. The sun was already blazing, and by the afternoon, the temperature had climbed to a blistering 121 degrees Fahrenheit, 49 degrees Celsius. Most people were staying inside, or, at the very least, far from the scorching desert trails. But not Steve. He had hiked from Golden Canyon to Zabriskie Point, a popular lookout that offers panoramic views of the arid, surreal landscape. There, he ran into a reporter from the Los Angeles Times. The heat was brutal. When asked why he'd chosen to hike in such extreme conditions, Steve just smiled and said, why not? He was wearing a sun hat, sunscreen, and carried a backpack, confident and prepared. Or so it seemed. What many forget, or simply don't realize, is that Death Valley doesn't play fair. It's the hottest place on the planet, home to the world record temperature of 134 degrees Fahrenheit, 57 degrees Celsius, recorded back in 1913. The canyon walls don't just hold the heat, they amplify it, bouncing the sun's rays back at you from every direction. Even seasoned hikers can find themselves overwhelmed. Steve continued his trek despite warnings from park officials about the dangers of venturing out after mid-morning. As he made his way back toward the trailhead, the unrelenting heat finally caught up with him. Around 3:40 p.m., just steps from a restroom near the Golden Canyon trailhead, Steve collapsed. Bystanders rushed to help and called 911. Park rangers arrived quickly and performed CPR, even using a defibrillator in hopes of reviving him. But it was too late. Steve had succumbed to the intense heat. He died doing what he loved, but underestimating one of the most dangerous forces in nature. Back home, his wife, Rima, had no idea where Steve had gone that morning. She expected him to walk through the door later that day, tired but smiling. Instead, she found a coroner's notice pinned to their front door. Her worst fear had come true. Speaking to reporters afterward, Rima painted a picture of a man who was endlessly curious, fearless, and full of life. Steve loved sleeping under the stars, cooking by campfire, and pushing himself on rugged trails. But she also shared a sobering truth. The heat, she said, is not a foe you can overcome. Death Valley's dangers are real, and they don't discriminate. The park is vast, mostly unshaded, and nearly void of natural water sources. Even experienced hikers like Steve can fall victim to heat stroke when the body's cooling system shuts down, leading to dizziness, confusion, unconsciousness, and, in severe cases, death. The location where Steve collapsed is far from immediate help. High temperatures in the area also make helicopter rescues more difficult or even impossible. That same summer, another man died after his car's air conditioning failed, leaving him stranded in the intense heat. Death Valley saw 29 days of 110 degrees Fahrenheit, plus temperatures that season alone. Still, people keep coming. Some are drawn by the challenge. Others simply don't realize the risk until it's too late. Park rangers continue to urge visitors, avoid hiking after 10 a.m., stay hydrated, wear light clothing, and most importantly, know when to turn back. Steve Curry was no amateur. He respected nature, but in the end, even a lifetime of experience wasn't enough to outmatch Death Valley. His story serves as a powerful reminder. Adventure is thrilling, but survival always comes first. As Rima said, the heat is not a foe you can overcome, and sometimes knowing when not to go is the bravest thing you can do. It was supposed to be another adrenaline-fueled day for Ian Forgaze, a seasoned 54-year-old backcountry skier from Lincoln, Vermont, as he carved through the rugged, snow-draped slopes of New Hampshire's Mount Washington. Known for embracing nature's harshest playgrounds, Ian was no rookie. He had skied solo before, danced with danger on technical lines, and trusted his instincts where others wouldn't even venture. But on February 1st, 2021, his thirst for adventure would take a tragic turn. Mount Washington, the crown jewel of the White Mountains, is as breathtaking as it is brutal. Its beauty masks its danger, bone-chilling winds, unpredictable weather, and, most treacherous of all, avalanches. The Ammonoosuc Ravine, where Ian set off that fateful morning, rests on the mountain's western flank. It's lesser known than the infamous Tuckerman Ravine, but no less lethal. The snowpack there is fickle, and even when experts rate the avalanche danger as low, Mother Nature has her own rulebook. And so, with temperatures in the single digits and winds gusting at 33 miles per hour, Ian skied out alone. That day's forecast warned of small avalanches possible in isolated upper elevations, technical terms. But to Ian, it likely felt like a green light. But deep in the ravine lay a terrain trap, a natural funnel where snow, once loosened, doesn't just slide, it collapses. Tragically, that's exactly where Ian ventured. One wrong move onto a fragile pocket of wind-drifted snow triggered a slide that buried him under nearly 13 feet of compacted white. The chilling part? It didn't stop there. The avalanche was only the beginning. The snow kept falling the next day, and yet another slide buried him deeper. Ian had an avalanche transceiver, a beacon that could have led rescuers to him, and it did. But by the time search teams detected the signal on February 3rd, it was too late. It took rescuers over an hour and a half to dig him out, but Ian had already succumbed to asphyxiation. The rescue involved New Hampshire Fish and Game, the Mount Washington Avalanche Center, the Forest Service, and volunteers from the Mountain Rescue Service, a testament to the respect and concern Ian commanded. A detailed report followed, not to cast blame, but to honor the harsh truths of the mountain. Ian was not reckless. He was experienced, calculated, even prepared. But as one avalanche expert famously said, "It is good you are all experts, but the avalanche, it does not know that you are experts." What makes this case so haunting isn't just the death, it's how preventable it seemed. Ian was trained, equipped, and cautious, but he was alone, skiing over a thin snowpack above a known danger zone in a spot no skier had ever died before. He became the first, and perhaps that's the most gut-wrenching part, knowing that even with the best gear and experience, nature still writes the final chapter. In a world of GPS apps and smartwatches, there's something raw about the mountains, a reminder that the wilderness remains untamed. For thrill seekers like Ian, it's not about conquering nature, but about dancing with it. And sometimes the music stops too soon. He died doing what he loved. And though the snow took him, his story now echoes through the peaks. A solemn warning, a respected legacy, and a life remembered not just for how it ended, but for how fully it was lived. Michael de Gruy was a man whose passion for the ocean ran as deep as the trenches he explored. A renowned underwater cinematographer, filmmaker, and ocean advocate, de Gruy wasn't just a guy behind a camera, he was a force of nature. known for bringing the mysteries of the deep to living rooms around the world. With an infectious energy and a love for storytelling, he transformed the scientific into the spectacular, making marine biology feel like a grand adventure. But in a tragic and unexpected turn, the life of this fearless explorer was cut short, not by the wild, untamed ocean he adored, but by a helicopter crash on a clear afternoon in Australia. On February 4, 2012, Michael de Gruy, aged 60, was in New South Wales to begin work on yet another ambitious ocean documentary. He was joined by Australian filmmaker and producer Andrew White, a close collaborator of director James Cameron and the creative mind behind the film Sanctum. The two were scouting locations for an upcoming deep-sea project, likely filled with the kind of thrilling, visually rich content that had become de Gruy's signature. That afternoon, they boarded a Robinson R-44 helicopter at a small airfield near Nora. Shortly after takeoff, the aircraft veered left, lost control, and crashed, bursting into flames. Both men were killed instantly. For someone like de Gruy, who had survived shark bites, deep ocean dives, and countless underwater hazards, the idea that his life would end so abruptly on land felt almost surreal. It was a cruel irony that someone who had danced with danger in the most remote corners of the planet would lose his life during what should have been a routine flight. The loss was felt deeply across the scientific and filmmaking communities. Tributes poured in from around the world, remembering not just a brilliant filmmaker, but a man who inspired others to care about the oceans with unmatched enthusiasm. De Gruy's work had always gone beyond just capturing beautiful footage. He wanted people to feel something, to connect with the deep sea in ways that sparked curiosity, empathy, and urgency. He was outspoken about protecting marine ecosystems and was especially passionate about the need for sustainable stewardship of the planet's oceans. His TED Talk, delivered just months before his death, echoed that message. We must do better for the oceans, and we must act now. Colleagues often described him as someone who radiated intensity and warmth in equal measure. Whether he was filming rare creatures in pitch-black depths or speaking at conferences with a contagious gleam in his eye, de Gruy had a way of making people listen and care. His collaborations with National Geographic, the BBC, and Discovery brought us breathtaking footage from places few had ever seen, and even fewer dared to go. He turned the alien world beneath the waves into something familiar, even magical. His death, alongside Andrew White, was not just the loss of two great storytellers. It was the loss of visionaries. Both men dedicated their lives to exploring and documenting the world in order to better understand and protect it. And though their final journey ended far too soon, their work continues to inspire a new generation of filmmakers, scientists, and dreamers. Michael de Gruy once said, "I want people to love the ocean before it's too late." That mission still stands. His legacy lives on in every film, every lecture, every child who now wants to become a marine biologist because of something they saw in one of his documentaries. The deep sea may be a little darker without his light, but his message continues to ripple through the waves and through us. On October 30th, 2019, Deng Yuqiang, a Bright University senior from Hunan, China, set out on what she hoped would be a memorable adventure. She was heading to the Huashan Scenic Area in Shanxi Province, a place known not just for its jaw-dropping beauty, but also for its reputation as one of China's most dangerous hikes. Towering peaks, sheer cliffs, and thrilling trails attract thousands every year, and Deng was excited to experience it for herself. Like many travelers today, Deng wanted to document her journey. She posted photos and updates throughout her hike, sharing the stunning scenery and her joy with friends and family back home. Everything seemed to be going well, but none of them could have known those would be the last photos she'd ever post. Her final stop was the West Peak Observation Deck, a popular viewing spot perched high above the ground. The view from there is nothing short of spectacular, with panoramic sights that stretch across the rugged mountainscape. But there was a catch. The safety railings at that deck were shockingly low, just about 60 centimeters high, barely reaching an adult's thigh. Like many tourists, Deng wanted a perfect shot to mark the moment. She stood near the edge, adjusting her phone for the best angle. With her back to the drop, she leaned in slightly to get it just right, but the surface beneath her was uneven, and in a split second her foot slipped. She lost her balance and fell backward over the railing. The drop was over 2,000 meters. No one noticed immediately. It wasn't until the next day that search and rescue teams located her body. Security footage later confirmed what had happened. Dung had slipped while taking a selfie. There were 5 tourists and 2 staff members on the deck that day, but no one could react quickly enough to stop the tragedy. In the aftermath, the Huashan Scenic Area Management addressed the incident but denied any fault. According to them, the railing met safety standards, and Dung's fall was the result of her own actions. They initially offered her family a sum of 40,000 yuan, about $5,700, as humanitarian aid, but again accepted no responsibility. Her family was devastated and outraged. To them, the idea that 60-centimeter railings were considered safe on a mountaintop observation deck was absurd. They also criticized the delayed response in locating Dung after her fall, arguing that faster action might have made a difference. The family questioned whether park staff had truly warned tourists about the risks. Management claimed they had, but Dung's loved ones weren't convinced. They believed that with stronger barriers and better precautions, this tragedy could have been prevented. As public pressure grew and media coverage intensified, the park eventually increased the offer to 170,000 yuan, about $24,000. But even then, they continued to insist they weren't to blame. Dung's death sparked wider conversations about safety in popular but hazardous tourist destinations, like Huashan Mountain. Despite its beauty, the mountain is infamous for its narrow trails, vertical drops, and sections where visitors must walk on wooden planks bolted to cliff sides. Official fatality numbers are hard to come by, but it's believed that dozens may lose their lives there each year. Dung's story became a chilling reminder of how easily things can go wrong when we underestimate the dangers of nature, especially in the pursuit of that perfect photo. Her family fought not just for compensation, but for accountability and for better safety measures so no one else would suffer the same fate. Still, the park held its ground, claiming the tragedy was unavoidable. Today, Huashan continues to draw thousands of thrill seekers, its risks unchanged. And Dung Yuqiang's story remains a haunting reminder that behind every breathtaking view, danger can quietly wait just one step away. For most people, an adventure to a remote tropical island sounds like a dream vacation. Turquoise waters, untouched beaches, and the thrill of exploring the unknown. For 26-year-old John Allen Chow, it was more than that. It was a sacred mission, an opportunity to bring the love of Jesus to a tribe untouched by the modern world. But what John didn't know, or perhaps knew all too well, was that this mission would not only be his greatest test of faith, but his final journey. It was November 2018, and John had just arrived in India's far-flung Andaman and Nicobar Islands, a stunning archipelago of 836 islands, many of them wild, mysterious, and shrouded in danger. Among them, North Sentinel Island stood apart, a forbidden zone. No hotels, no tours, no welcome signs, just a dense canopy of jungle, the sound of waves, and a people who've made it violently clear for decades they do not want visitors. The Sentinelese are believed to be descendants of the earliest humans to migrate out of Africa, untouched by modern civilization, isolated for tens of thousands of years. Their hostility to outsiders isn't just legendary, it's deadly. They've shot arrows at helicopters, killed lost fishermen, and live completely off the grid. Stepping foot on North Sentinel means risking your life, and the Indian government makes it illegal to even approach the island within 3 miles. But John Chow wasn't deterred. A devout Christian and adventure seeker from Washington State, John had dreamed of sharing the gospel with remote tribes since college. He trained for this. He took immunizations to avoid infecting the tribe. He studied linguistics. He knew the risks. In his journal, he wrote, "I don't want to die. Would it be wiser to leave and let someone else continue? No, I think I'm called to do this." On November 15th, 2018, after bribing local fishermen with $325 to get close to the island, John paddled ashore in a kayak. He came bearing gifts, a football, scissors, and fish. But instead of a welcome party, he was greeted by arrows. One, he later wrote, hit his Bible. He swam back to the boat that night, shaken but undeterred. The next morning, he tried again. What happened next was only seen from a distance. The fishermen watched in horror as islanders dragged John's body along the beach, then buried it. They returned to Port Blair and broke the news. Police soon arrested 7 people for helping John reach the island. Meanwhile, Indian authorities debated whether to retrieve his body, knowing full well that approaching the Sentinelese could trigger more violence or expose them to modern diseases. Aerial surveillance later confirmed what the fishermen saw, a grave on the sand. The incident exploded across global media. Videos, think pieces, and fiery tweets debated whether John was a martyr or a misguided intruder. "This is not missionary work, it's suicide," said one critic. Others saw bravery in his faith. But make no mistake, North Sentinel Island is one of the most dangerous places on Earth, not because of venomous snakes or volcanoes, but because it is humanity untouched and fiercely protected. Survival there isn't about gear or guts. It's about knowing when to stay away. John's family grieved, but forgave his killers. In a public statement, they called him a beloved son, brother, uncle, and best friend. His church saw him as someone who died doing what he believed in, despite the cost. He wasn't reckless in preparation, he was reckless in conviction. And maybe that's the tragedy, not just that John Chow died, but that in his final act of devotion, he met people who didn't need saving, and never asked to be found. In June 2016, Yellowstone National Park, a place known for its raw, untouched beauty and otherworldly geothermal features, became the backdrop for a heartbreaking and deeply sobering incident. Colin Scott, a 23-year-old from Oregon, and his sister Sable were visiting the Norris Geyser Basin, one of the hottest and most dangerous thermal areas in the entire park. That afternoon, they made a decision that would change everything. They stepped off the designated boardwalk and ventured into the restricted geothermal zone, searching for a natural hot spring to soak in, an illegal and highly discouraged activity known as hot potting. As they wandered more than 200 yards into the basin, Sable recorded their exploration on her phone. The footage would later become part of a National Park Service report, detailing the moments leading up to the tragedy. Colin approached the edge of a hot spring, knelt down, and attempted to test the water temperature, but the fragile, unstable crust of the ground gave way beneath him. In an instant, he fell into a pool of boiling, acidic water. The temperature in these springs can reach over 200 degrees Fahrenheit, and many are extremely acidic due to the high concentrations of sulfur and other minerals. What might look like calm, steaming water on the surface is, in reality, a deadly mix of scalding temperatures and chemical activity. Rangers were called immediately, and they arrived at the scene later that day. They were able to briefly spot Colin's remains, his head and upper torso, in the pool, but worsening weather conditions, including lightning storms, forced them to abandon the recovery effort that evening. By the time they returned the next day, there was nothing left to recover. The heat and acidity of the spring had completely dissolved his body overnight. Only Colin's wallet and a pair of flip-flops remained on the edge of the spring, serving as haunting reminders of what had happened. The tragedy of Colin Scott is not just a shocking tale. It is a grim reminder of the hidden dangers that lie beneath Yellowstone's scenic surface. Since the late 1800s, more than 20 people have died from thermal-related incidents in the park, often due to similar decisions to leave marked paths or ignore warning signs. The park staff repeatedly stresses that the boardwalks and trails are not there to restrict exploration. They exist because the landscape is unpredictable and deadly. What may appear to be solid ground can actually be a thin crust covering scalding acidic water just inches below. Colin's death sparked national conversations about park safety, visitor education, and the need for more awareness about the risks of geothermal areas. Park rangers continually work to prevent these types of tragedies, but they also face the reality that many visitors underestimate the danger or overestimate their own understanding of the environment. In this case, the desire for a unique experience, a private soak in a natural spring, came at the highest possible cost. At its core, this story is not about recklessness, but about how quickly a series of seemingly small decisions can lead to irreversible consequences. Yellowstone is a place of wonder, but it demands respect. Its geothermal features are some of the most volatile and dangerous on Earth, and they do not allow second chances. Colin Scott's story is a painful lesson, one that underscores the importance of listening to warnings, respecting nature's power, and understanding that not all beauty is meant to be touched. It was a cold, rainy day, November 27, 2017, deep in the Chernobyl exclusion zone in Ukraine. Dmitry Shkinder, a 33-year-old urban explorer from Zhodzina, Belarus, was doing what he loved most, venturing into places most people wouldn't dare step foot in. This time, his destination was Chernobyl 2, a heavily restricted military zone tucked within one of the most radioactive regions on Earth. Dmitry wasn't alone. He was joined by two friends, a man and a woman, both fellow explorers. They were part of a niche community known as stalkers, urban adventurers who illegally sneak into forbidden or abandoned areas. For them, the risk was part of the thrill, and in this world, Chernobyl is the ultimate prize. After the 1986 nuclear disaster, Chernobyl and the surrounding areas were evacuated and sealed off, left to decay in silence. But the ruins attracted a different kind of visitor. People like Dmitry, drawn by mystery, danger, and the ghostly remains of a world frozen in time. Chernobyl, too, in particular, was infamous. Hidden behind fences and radiation signs stood the Duga radar, a massive Cold War relic, 150 meters tall, made of rusted steel beams and eerie, decaying platforms. Once used to detect incoming missiles, it now loomed like a skeleton over the forest, calling to explorers like a siren. But this wasn't a good day for climbing. The weather was rough. Strong winds and steady rain had turned every metal rung slick and treacherous. Still, Dmitry and his male friend couldn't resist. They wanted to reach the top of the Duga, to conquer one of the most iconic and illegal climbs in the world. Their female companion stayed on the ground, watching. Dmitry was no amateur. He had years of experience exploring decaying buildings and forgotten ruins. He was known for being careful, methodical, even in dangerous conditions. But no amount of skill could protect him from what happened next. As they climbed higher into the storm, a powerful gust of wind hit. The rain-slicked steel offered no grip. In a split second, Dmitry slipped. He fell 15 meters, his body slamming against the cold metal structure before crashing down. His friend could do nothing but scream for help. Emergency services were called, and an ambulance arrived quickly, but it was already too late. Dmitry didn't survive the fall. The urban exploration community was stunned. Dmitry had a reputation for being cautious, someone who respected the risks. His death hit hard. To make it even more haunting, just moments before he fell, Dmitry had taken one final photo, an eerie snapshot from high above the trees, capturing the view from the top of the radar. It would be the last thing he ever saw. The tragedy didn't end with his fall. Authorities responded swiftly. His two companions, despite their shock, were charged with illegally entering a restricted zone. Both were fined, and the woman, who had never even left the ground, faced deportation. Dmitry's body was transported back to Belarus, where a grieving wife and 3 children waited for a husband and father who would never return. His death became a sobering reminder. Even the most experienced explorers aren't invincible. Chernobyl, too, remains a chilling monument, not just to Soviet history, but to the dangers of pushing past the boundaries of safety in search of adrenaline. Urban explorers still sneak into the zone, driven by curiosity, thrill, or the desire for the perfect photo. But Dmitry's story stands as a warning. Some places are abandoned for a reason, and sometimes the cost of adventure is a price too high to pay. It was supposed to be a perfect summer day, blue skies, family barbecue, laughter echoing by the water. For Aaron Page, an energetic 8-year-old daredevil from Pontefract, West Yorkshire, it was his birthday, the kind of day you dream about as a kid. June 5th, 2021, one of the hottest days of the year, seemed like the perfect time for Aaron and his family to swap their backyard barbecue plans for a spontaneous trip to Bolton Abbey, a popular beauty spot nestled in North Yorkshire's rolling hills. But what none of them knew was that the River Wharfe, sparkling in the sun, was hiding a dark and deadly secret. At first glance, Bolton Abbey looks like something out of a fairy tale. Stone bridges, wooded trails, families skipping stones. But the river that flows through it is anything but gentle. The river. Wharfe, especially near a notorious section called the Strid, is one of the most deceptive and dangerous bodies of water in the UK. It narrows sharply, forcing gallons of water through tight rocky crevices, creating powerful undercurrents that can suck even the strongest swimmer under. It's been said that no one who's fallen in there has ever made it out alive. To survive this place, you need more than just swimming skills. You need knowledge of the river's hidden perils, proper safety gear, and frankly, a good deal of luck. Aaron, the youngest of 5 and known by his family as a bit of a wild spirit, had his eyes on the teens jumping from a tree into the water upstream. "I'm doing that," he declared with birthday boy confidence. His dad, Alan, quickly shut it down. "No, you're not," he warned, and they meant it. No one had planned to go swimming, but tragedy doesn't always wait for a plan. As the family set up their barbecue just past 2 p.m., Aaron's dad asked his older brother Joshua to walk him to the toilet, just 200 yards from the picnic spot. The boys wandered onto a cobbled beach near the riverbank, standing ankle-deep on slick rocks. In a heartbreaking moment that Joshua later recounted at the inquest, Aaron slipped. "I tried to pull him out," Joshua said, "but I slipped. I let go." Panic erupted. Joshua's screams were heard by nearby paddlers. Andrea Campbell, a day tripper, dove in without hesitation. "I could just see his head under the water," she cried at the inquest, but the current was too strong. One moment Aaron was there, then he was gone. A full-scale rescue effort began. Police divers, the Yorkshire Air Ambulance, 28 volunteer rescuers, and frantic members of the public scoured the river. For 3 excruciating hours, Aaron's family waited. At 6:25 p.m., the worst was confirmed. His body was found downstream, lifeless. He had drowned. Videos and tributes soon flooded social media, turning Aaron into a symbol of just how unforgiving nature can be. The tragedy sparked renewed calls for better signage and safety measures around the river Wharfe, especially near Bolton Abbey and the Strid. The most tragic part? Aaron didn't do anything reckless. He didn't dive from a tree. He wasn't even swimming. He simply slipped on his birthday. But Aaron Page died surrounded by family who adored him, and his brother did everything he could. He died on a day filled with love, laughter, and sunshine, and that's how he'll be remembered. If you've ever felt claustrophobic in an elevator or stuck in a crowded subway, that's just a tiny glimpse of what John Edward Jones went through in one of the most haunting caving accidents in modern history. It was Thanksgiving week 2009 when 26-year-old John, an ambitious medical student, devoted husband and father to a 1-year-old daughter, decided to go on a caving trip with family and friends in Utah. Their destination was Nutty Putty Cave, a notorious spot for thrill-seeking adventurers, known just as much for its winding, twisty passages as it was for its history of trapping unprepared explorers. John had caved before and was familiar with the risks, but nothing could have prepared him or anyone else for what was about to happen that night. Nutty Putty Cave isn't your average walk-in cave. It's a labyrinth of narrow crawl spaces and tight squeezes, some with names like the Birth Canal and the Big Slide. At around 8 p.m. on November 24th, John entered what he believed to be a familiar section. But in a tragic mistake, he veered into an uncharted, nearly vertical crevice that dropped down at a sharp angle. Crawling in head first, he quickly realized it was a dead end, but not before becoming stuck. Not just wedged in a tight spot stuck. We're talking upside down, body folded, chest compressed, legs dangling behind him, stuck inside a fissure barely 10 inches wide and 18 inches high. From there, the nightmare began. John was pinned 100 feet below the surface and at least 400 feet from the cave entrance. Rescuers were called in almost immediately. Over 130 volunteers and emergency personnel arrived, working in rotating shifts to reach him. They brought him food, water, and even tried to boost his morale. His voice reportedly remained calm and hopeful for much of the ordeal, even managing to talk to his wife via phone line. Rescuers used pulleys, harnesses, and drills to try and pull him free, but the cave fought back. At one point, John was actually moved slightly, just inches, but then disaster struck. A pulley system failed, and he slipped even deeper into the crevice, his position becoming even more dire. As the hours dragged on, John's upside-down posture caused his blood to pool in his upper body, compressing his organs and making breathing increasingly difficult. Despite the heroic efforts of rescue teams, some of whom risked their lives trying to reach him, it became clear that he couldn't be freed without extreme danger to everyone involved. After 27 grueling hours, John fell unconscious and passed away shortly after, likely from cardiac arrest brought on by his position and internal pressure. It was a devastating end to what began as a joyful family outing. In the aftermath, the decision was made not to recover John's body due to the risks involved. Instead, Nutty Putty Cave was sealed permanently, filled with concrete and left as both a tomb and a somber memorial. His death led to widespread changes in cave safety policies across the country. Rescue teams reevaluated protocols, and amateur cavers became far more cautious. John's story spread around the world, not just as a cautionary tale, but as a testament to human fragility, bravery, and the limits of rescue. To this day, the entrance to Nutty Putty Cave remains sealed, marked only with a plaque bearing John's name. His story is a powerful reminder that even the most experienced adventurers can be caught off guard, and sometimes nature doesn't give second chances. It was a clear, crisp evening in January 2025 when 21-year-old Eve McCarthy set out for a climb in southern Spain. A final-year physiology student from Shankill, Dublin, Eve was no stranger to adventure. That day, she and a male climbing partner had chosen the stunning yet notoriously dangerous trail near El Caminito del Rey, a place as breathtaking as it is deadly. This former workers' path, built into the cliffs of El Chorro Gorge, is now a tourist hotspot for thrill seekers. The trail hugs the rock face hundreds of feet above the ground, with sections so narrow that a single misstep could be fatal. And while it's been renovated in recent years, many parts remain treacherous, especially near the Swiss sector and Arabic staircase, where Eve was climbing. Around 7 p.m. as they began their descent through a particularly unstable section, something went terribly wrong. Both Eve and her climbing partner lost their footing. He managed to grab onto a bush-covered rock, miraculously stopping his fall. Eve wasn't as lucky. She plunged nearly 500 feet into the ravine below. Despite the quick response of emergency crews, she had not survived. Her climbing partner was rescued alive, shaken but safe. Eve's body was recovered shortly afterward. The news of her death shook not only her family and friends, but the wider community back home in Dublin and the outdoor world alike. Shockingly, hers was the second fatal fall on that same stretch of trail within a month. Back in Shankill, Eve was remembered as so much more than just a victim of a tragic accident. She was vibrant, outgoing, and full of energy, the kind of person who made friends wherever she went. She worked part-time at King's Pub in Dalkey, where she was known for her quick wit, infectious laugh, and ability to light up a room. The pub closed its doors for 3 days in her honor. Her parents, Helen and Paul McCarthy, were heartbroken. In a moving tribute, they described Eve as a bright light in the lives of everyone who knew her, fiercely determined, endlessly curious, and always kind. She had a passion for basketball, and though she wasn't the tallest on the court, her speed and grit made her a force to be reckoned with. Friends remembered how their house was always full. Eve had that way of bringing people together. Whether it was for a spontaneous road trip or a late-night chat over tea, she was always up for an adventure. That adventurous spirit is part of what led her to Spain and to Caminito del Rey. Her funeral at St. Anne's Church in Shankill was packed. So many came that some had to watch the service from the parish center and even online. Former classmates, neighbors, co-workers, and teammates all gathered to say goodbye, sharing memories of the girl who never stopped moving, dreaming, or laughing. Eve's passing served as a grim reminder of the risks that come with high adrenaline travel. Just a month earlier, a 20-year-old British climber lost his life in the same area. Despite new safety measures, such as handrails, harness lines, and repaired walkways, the trail still poses real danger. The altitude, unstable ground, and narrow paths make it unforgiving even for seasoned climbers. Eve McCarthy's life was cut short far too soon, but her impact was undeniable. She was a spark, someone who lived boldly and loved deeply. Her story is one of adventure, spirit, and heartbreaking loss. Though she's no longer here, the people who loved her carry her memory forward every day. And for those who walk dangerous paths, her story is a reminder to never take a single step for granted.